Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Reed Young, aka Shuda, for TransformPoker.com. I'm going to be reviewing a heads-up hand this time, and it's kind of a cool spot because we're trying to figure out whether or not to make a pretty thin-looking value bet on the river, and it's so thin it's almost like turning our hand into a bluff. So let's get into the action. So we're heads up. We min-raise on the button, which I think is fine against a lot of players. If you're against someone who's has a tendency to play out of position a little bit more often than maybe they should, I think raising to a larger size is going to be better for you. It's going to get more money on the pot immediately, and you can take advantage of your position when you can make better decisions than your opponent who's out of position with marginal holdings. So let's not spend too much time talking about pre-flop sizing because, like we were saying, the crux of this hand is the river decision. So let's get to it. The big blind checks to us on this board. I think it's fine. Heads up, both players are going to have a lot of middling type hands, whereas in a 6 max or full ring game, a lot of players have a raising distribution that's pretty high card heavy just because those are the hands that play best in larger pots. So, leading from the big blind has a lot more merit, or leading into the pre-flop raiser rather has a lot more merit than in a heads-up match on this 8-7-5 board texture. So I think checking is fine from the big blind. I'm sure you could mix in some leads as well. So after the big blind checks, we continuation bet our top two pair. Definitely a good idea, especially on such a draw-heavy board. But betting two pair on the flop, kind of a no-brainer decision there. We get check raise to just over 3 times our bet. About probably a standard size. I think it's a good size for him to check raise to. Maybe a little small, but no big deal. We call. I think calling is a good idea. A lot of people might get kind of confused about that because their hand looks so strong. But if you think about this board texture, there's a lot of hands that we could have that are actually a lot stronger than 8-7 first off. So, we could have pocket 5s, pocket 7s, pocket 8s, 9-6, 6-4 suited, all sorts of stuff like that that are better than 8-7. And then more importantly, when we get all in, our equity isn't going to be that great. So if we re-raise and then call a 4-bet shove on the flop, we're going to be against a flush draw, probably something that's also connected and has some sort of straightening outs as well. We're going to be against a straight and be in terrible shape, or a set and be in pretty bad shape as well. So really, if you 3-bet and then call a 4-bet all in, you're just hoping to raise, which is not a great way to get all the money in. And then, the good thing about 3-betting is that you might fold some hands out that do have a lot of equity against you, like, Ace-6 of hearts or something that might have check raised you as a semi-bluff. But I don't think it's a great time to do it with this hand. Other hands would play better, I think, to put into your 3-betting range, like just a straight bluff, some nut flush draws, of course, and then, your stronger hands, like the ones we were naming earlier. So calling here, I think, is standard. We call. The turn is the Jack of Diamonds, which is kind of scary because 10-9 gets there, and certainly you could be check raising with 10-9. But I think that there's so many other likely check raising candidates on the flop that we just have to call this turn bet. And then if we don't call this turn bet with top 2 pair, like we said, if we're 3-betting and getting it in on the flop with all those other hands, which I think is a mistake. Like, of course, you want to slow play sometimes, but with most of those other hands, then our range on the turn is going to be pretty weak on this card, and we need to be calling with hands as strong as 8-7. So again, we kind of reason ourselves into another no-brainer call on the turn. On the river, the straight gets there, and our opponent checks to us. So now we're trying to figure out what are his most likely hands. He could have a set, he could have a straight that he's checking to us on the river just to induce. Perhaps he's thinking because the board gets so scary that we're not going to call it off with anything else. So he wants to give us the opportunity to turn our hand into a bluff. Once he checks to us, I think we just need to check back with this particular hand because we have a lot of weaker hands that we could turn into a bluff. So first off, you aren't necessarily happy turning your entire range into a bluff unless your opponent's going to be making a lot of mistakes check folding far too often. I don't think that's going to happen on this river because, like we were saying, the board just gets so scary that he'd probably be bluffing if he had any air, so he's not going to be check folding air very much. And it's also extremely difficult for him to have a hand that's strong enough to value bet on the turn and then check fold on the river that also is worse than I'm sorry, that's also better than 7-8. So you'd basically specifically have to have a set or somehow and randomly just have Jack 5. So those aren't very many combinations, and because of that, I think checking back is the best play, and we should be bluffing with other hands. Let me know what you guys think that you would do on this river in the comment section below, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I will see you guys next time.